Another deck? Yeah, there are a lot of interesting commanders in this set. Taii Wakeen is another interesting Boros card, and this color combination doesn't have a lot of them. I remember the first Feather card that did this for the color pair, and Taii Wakeen doesn't work with constant recursion of targeted spells, so this is even different from the first interesting ones. Taii Wakeen works with non-combat damage of any kind. She's still a card draw machine, and Boros decks need that from their commanders in order for them to be good in any way. Taii Wakeen gives you a card whenever you target something with damage equal to that creature's total toughness. This effect does not worry about damage, so let's say you target Feather and deal 2 damage first and then another 2, that doesn't work. You need to make the perfect shot at once. Her second ability of Taii Wakeen is that if a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a permanent or player, it deals that much damage plus X instead. And the most interesting part here for you to remember is that if a source you control would deal non-combat damage, not a target or anything, this works for every non-combat damage you deal on this turn from this moment on. So that is really strong. All of your small spells will deal that much more damage. So let's look at the damage spells that we will use. The first one is Tectonic Hazard, a 1 mana sorcery, and there are 3 or 4 of these, that says it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature they control. So put in 10 mana, put this on top of that, and you deal 11 damage to every creature and every opponent. Of course, you might try to use the card draw effect of Taii Wakeen, but you could also use this as a finisher very easily, because 11 damage to all of your opponents will only need you to take 4 turns. Next up is Spikefield Hazard. This is a cool example because yes, on the front end it deals 1 damage to any target, that's one side, but it's also a land. And this one wasn't even that popular, so many of these effects aren't even that expensive at this moment. Another one I really like is Smash to Dust, because it also can be used as a removal for artifacts, or I guess removal for creatures with Defender if you find them. Next up is a really cool theme, because let's look at Brash Taunter. It's a 5 mana goblin, a 1/1 with Indestructible. So every time we would deal 1 damage, non-combat damage to Brash Taunter, we could draw a card. Other than that, it says whenever it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target opponent. And in this deck, I can tell you there are multiple ways to go infinite with this. Next up is Darksteel Mutation, because it makes another creature into an insect with 1 toughness, which we love. And it will give them Indestructible, which we love on 1 toughness creatures. It does lose all other abilities, card types and creature types, so you could target your opponent's creatures with this one as well, and you wouldn't mind at all. And then one card that is really cool with this, without using the X cost of Taii Wakeen, is Grape Shot, because it is a 2 mana sorcery that says deal 1 damage to any target and copy this spell for every spell you have cast before it this turn, Storm. So that means that you can deal 1 damage to multiple targets once, twice, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times. But you could also amplify this effect with the Taii Wakeen cost. The thing is, you would need a lot of mana of course for this. But there are multiple avenues in which you can win. For example, Thorbrand, Thane of Red Fell, gives all your red sources that deal damage to an opponent or a permanent they control an extra 2 damage on top of the damage they are doing. So one thing I really like about this is that you still deal only 1 damage or whatever you deal to your creatures. And the other part is that any of your spells, your damage spells, of which you have a lot, this will amplify. And there are multiple effects and ways to do this. Virtue of Courage I really like, because the 2 mana instant adventure also deals 2 damage to any target. But the 5 mana enchantment says whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, you may exile that many cards from the top of your library and play them. So in this way you can keep going off. And another way to amplify your damage spells is Ojer Oxenil, which makes your red sources that would deal an amount of non-combat damage less than Ojer Oxenil's power to an opponent deal exactly the power equal to his power. Exactly the damage equal to his power. Meaning that you can very easily kill your opponents in this deck because you have that many small ping effects. And of course, Ojer Oxenil can come back as the Temple of Power, and then you will just need 3 mana and to tap this land. Whenever you have activated whenever you have dealt 4 or more non-combat damage this turn with your red sources, and you will easily do this. Next up is Duplication, because for example, Return a Favor is a really cool new uncommon that says for 2 mana you spree. So you may pay 1 for either of these effects on top of the 2 mana you paid, and then you can copy target instant spell, sorcery, activated ability or triggered ability and choose new targets for the copy. You could even target Taii Wakeen's abilities with this, or you can pay 1 to change the target of target spell or ability with a single target. So this is also stopping your opponent's cards and redirecting them to something else. Or you could of course copy some of your spells that you want more of. Next up is Thoralf, God of Fury. It's a 4 mana god that says whenever a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, Thoralf deals damage equal to that excess damage to any target other than that permanent. And that is non-combat damage as well, so that will also get amplified. And this can really get a nice chain lightning reaction. The other side of Thoralf is his hammer. This is also pretty good in this deck because you play it, you equip it on a creature, then you unattach it for 2 mana and it deals 3 damage to any target. So that is in a way for 6 mana a way for you to deal some more damage if you really need it. But that's a lot of mana of course, but you could. Next up is Chandra's Incinerator, a 6 mana elemental. I don't like 6 mana spells too much, like Thoralf's hammer if you think about it. But this one says this spell costs X less to cast, where X is the total amount of non-combat damage dealt to your opponents this turn. And that will pretty much always be 5. It has trample, cool, but whenever a source you control deals non-combat damage to an opponent, the Incinerator also deals that much damage to target creature or planeswalker that player controls. Meaning, if you have this and Thoralf in play, you can really pop off quickly, because Thoralf's ability will make sure that your excess damage will be dealt to another target. You could also say your opponents. And then Chandra's Incinerator will also make sure that the non-combat damage you deal to your opponents will target another creature. So even just a targeted spell from your side will be pretty devastating in most scenarios. Next up is the duplication of Taii Wakeen's effect. For example, Battle Mage's Bracers is an equipment that you put on Taii Wakeen, and then if you activate her ability, which isn't a mana ability, you may copy that ability. So in this way, for just 1 extra mana, if you set this up, of course, you get to copy the ability and make way more damage happen. Next up is Illusionist's Bracers, which does basically the same. It's even a little bit cheaper if you think about it. It says whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, again, isn't a mana ability, you copy the ability. Even better, I would say. Next up is ways to give your spells, or at least your instants and sorceries, lifelink. Radiant Scroll Wielder does this and also works as a little bit of sort of card advantage. It says your instants and sorceries have lifelink, so you gain life for all the damage you do. And at the beginning of your upkeep, exile an instant or sorcery card at random from your graveyard and you may cast it again. It does exile that card, so it doesn't go, let's say, infinite, but it is still a lot of card advantage on top of a very good card because you love that life gain in this deck. Next up is Heartflame Duelist, which also gives your instants and sorceries lifelink, but also is a 3 mana spell that deals 3 damage to any target. So we love that already. Next up is the Catapult group. One I really like is Urbrask. This guy is a 4 mana Praetor that says whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, Urbrask deals 1 damage to target opponent. And we love that because it will also get amplified. You also get a red mana, and 1 red mana is probably enough to cast your next instant or sorcery spell. And on the other side, Urbrask works great as well. Or the great work, I guess. The first part of his story is, or saga, is that the great work deals 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. So whenever with Urbrask on the field you have played 3 instants and sorceries in a turn, you get to board wipe again just for 1 mana. The second saga part is you create 3 treasure tokens. And we love treasure tokens because that will help us storm off later as well. And then the third part is until end of turn you may cast instants and sorcery spells from any graveyard. If a spell cast this way would be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. So you get to play every instant and sorcery. This means that you get to storm off so hard that I think you must win the game after this. But let me know if you didn't. Another one I really like is Invasion of Karsus because it is already a sort of board wipe where it deals 3 damage to each creature and each planeswalker. But then when you flip the battle, you get Refraction Elemental, which has whenever you cast a spell, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So it is also again a finisher and a catapult in that way. Defiler of Instinct is a sort of brother of Urbrask. It is another 4 mana Fraction that says all of your red permanents cost 1 red mana less if you pay 2 life, and it will only reduce the amount of red mana you pay. But it makes your red spells cheaper, and we love that. By the way, almost all of our spells are red here. But that just works with permanents. So why do we like this card? Well, the second part says if you cast such a red permanent, of which we have a few, Defiler of Instinct deals 1 damage to any target, and that will again trigger all of our mechanics. So we do have a little bit of a hard time with casting our permanents. Defiler of Instinct will help with that, but he also helps you deal the first non-combat damage for all of your combos. Next up are the rituals, like Stormkiln Artist. It's a 4 mana dwarf that has Magecraft, so whenever you cast or copy, which we also sometimes do, an instant or sorcery spell, you create a treasure token. So these types of cards will really help us storm off. Next up is Seething Song, just a 3 mana instant that gives you 5 red mana, which we love because we need that mana. And you might think, well, mostly when Seething Song, for example, or any ritual is in a deck, that does mean that you will get problems with card draw, but Taii Wakeen is our card draw machine. So with enough mana you will be able to win in this deck. And Nab the Eternal I love because it is a 5 mana legendary creature, but it says at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, so basically your second one, add a red mana for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. So this will give you a lot of mana. It will basically more than duplicate, maybe triplicate your amount of damage if you think about it. Next up is a really cool part which is really good in standard as well at this moment. Or standard? Yeah, well, it will be, or at least I've seen it a little bit ago, where at least you play cards that will help you get the cards out of your graveyard and play them instantly. In this case, Mizzix's Mastery, which is a 4 mana card usually, where you exile an instant or sorcery from your graveyard, and you may copy it and cast a copy without paying its mana cost. But for 8 mana you can copy all of your instants from your graveyard and play them. So that means that you do need to again exile your graveyard basically, but you do get to play all of your instants and sorceries again, and with enough Taii Wakeen mana on top of that, this will really explode in your opponent's faces. Next up is Past in Flames, a 4 mana sorcery. Again, each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback, and with all the mana that we will be making, this will be pretty easy to cast and your spells will be pretty cheap anyways. And of course Underworld Breach, which is a 2 mana enchantment that says every non-land card in your graveyard has escape, and the escape cost is equal to its mana cost plus you exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. So again, another spell like Past in Flames, I would say, where you will need to pay a lot more mana after playing Underworld Breach, and you will be needing to exile a bunch of cards from your graveyard aside from that, so that you will not be able to play all of your instants and sorceries probably. But this will again help you win very easily and get a bunch more cards, so you don't really mind your graveyard being empty if you have like infinite cards in your hand. That was it for this deck. I would love to know what you think about it and what you especially love about it. And with that, I wish you a very nice day.